I was born in 1927.
1927, and you started dancing. How old were you?
I don't ever remember not dancing.
Okay.
Probably 3 or 4 years old. Mother used to say I never walked, I danced.
So you first danced professionally at 14?
Yeah.
Wow. Now
That's a story and a half.
And so you say you had your first professional job at 14.
Yeah.
Where was that?
It was at the Boston Opera House. So I went in the stage door, went in, and there were some men sitting in like the third and fourth row, very busy. So I walked in, plunked my suitcase down, and I remember this like it was yesterday. And I said, "I'm here." And they looked up at me, and I said, "Yeah. What are you here for?" I said, "I'm ready to dance for you." Nobody knew I was going.
And did you get in trouble for that?
No. Well, let me tell you what happened. I came in, and it was to Lover, and my teacher had choreographed a beautiful dance for me, and it had everything in it but the kitchen sink. So it showed off what your talents were. She had that knack. And so I danced for them. They said, "Okay, dance audition, I think, is at 1 o'clock. Can you be back then?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I came back at 1 o'clock, and they auditioned everybody in small groups of 6. And they kept saying, they take maybe one or none from this group. And they say, "You go here, you go there." And there were a small group of us over by the piano. And I thought, oh, gosh, we're kicked out. Well, we're the ones they chose. Right. And then they auditioned us again, and I got the job. So then I thought, oh, what do I do now? So I went home and I told my grandmother, and I thought, I'm going to be in trouble with my mother. And Dota said, as long as you got the job, you're all right. We rehearsed for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we opened up. The show went for about 3 or 4 months. It was with Wilbur Evans and Kitty Carlisle, who was Moss Hart's wife. And oh, what a voice she had. And it was the Merry Widow.
I remember Kitty and Carlisle.
Yeah, and it was the Merry Widow.
Wow.
And so then we did, and then we went on the road for 3 or 4 months. I don't remember exactly how long, but in that vicinity. And then I came back and joined the class just for the tail end of the year.
So now, in your time growing up and learning to dance, all of your teachers were women, and
oh yes,
all of the students.
No, not all of them. I took from one man, Adolphe Robichaud, a Frenchman, who was very good. I took from him for a while, and I did learn a lot from him. He was a very stern ballet master, good, taught with a stick, bang, bang, bang on the floor, and but the rest of them were all women.
And then I know from your own stories, you actually went to New York when you were 16?
Yeah. And my teacher, Harriet, took me to New York. She'd been choreographing and dancing for Billy Rose at the Diamond Horseshoe. She did not want to perform anymore, and so Billy Rose said, "Do you have any young dancers that could fill the bill for you?" So she said, "Yeah, I have one. I'd like to bring and have you audition for you." So she brought me to New York. I auditioned for me, and he hired me on the spot.
What sorts of acts and what sort of place was the Diamond Horseshoe?
Well, the Diamond Horseshoe was elegant. It was where people came to be seen. They would arrive the women in cocktail dresses and fur coats, and the men in tuxedos, and the bill of fare was fantastic food. The menus were giant, almost the size of a newspaper. And it was in the bottom of the Paramount Hotel. So it was like a bowl, and it was shaped like a U with a little stage up here, and then there were 3 levels and a ballroom floor down here. So we danced on all parts of it. And we made our entrance up below and came up. And because I was underage, and I was the only one Billy Rose did it for, he treated me so good. I was so lucky to work for him. I lived right in the Paramount Hotel. Didn't want me associating with a lot of the other people because I was so young, and I had to lie about my age because they served liquor. And I was 16, and the age of serving liquor, you had to be 18. So Dodo and I lived upstairs, and I brought my grandmother with me, and I was underage, so I had to have a chaperone. He was the kind of guy you either loved him or hated him, because he was very strict. He knew what he wanted, and boy, he was in your camp if he liked what you did. And Harriet had taught us to be hard workers, and because she recommended me, he was really good to me. And we did 2 shows a night. On Saturday night we did 3, And it was a great time for us. Dodo and I just loved living in New York then. Then what he did, he would have the show in the Horseshoe for 6 months, and he'd take that show, put a new show in, take the old show, put it on the road. While we were on the road, he had us play at every camp, hospital, place where just entertain the servicemen.
You had a career in New York City that spanned, I'm trying to remember what year you formally retired. When did you stop dancing?
When did I? 1952.
So you danced from the age of 16 up until how old were you?
Well, I was, 20. I got married when I was 25, so 24. 23 really. I came home for a year. I hurt my ankle and came home to recuperate and never went back.
So your professional career was about 10 years.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And during your time in New York, you described the Diamond Horseshoe and Billy Rose. What other producers, in terms of the major people who hired you?
The Latin Quarter, the Copacabana, and I did a lot at club. I was so lucky. I was with Dick Henry at the William Morris office. I was the booking agent, and he used to book me in, especially the Waldorf Astoria. I used to get $50 for doing 2 dances. Wow. That was a lot of money in those days. Yes, and they would have these banquets, ask for entertainment, and they'd have a singer and maybe a ballroom couple and a comedian, and they'd always like to have a pretty girl dancing. So I was the pretty girl dancing. Dodo was a wonderful seamstress. She used to make me these beautiful costumes, because you had to supply your own music and your own costumes. They didn't supply that.
I had some memory that you had danced at Radio City.
Oh, I did.
Did you dance with the Rockettes?
No, I was not a Rockette. That's a naughty word to everybody. In fact, they don't even at the music hall. In those days, there were 3 companies. There was the Rockettes, who were owned by Russell Market. The music hall did not own the Rockettes. Never did. They still don't own them. Their paycheck was signed by Russell Market. Our paycheck was signed by the music hall treasurer. But there's also the symphony orchestra. The music hall owned 72-piece symphony orchestra, which was fantastic. The Glee Club, and a lot of people from the Metropolitan Opera would come and work in the Glee Club voice. There were 22 men. Their voices were unbelievable, the Glee Club. And then there was the ballet company, a music hall ballet company. And so there were the 4 groups. And of those, the music hall owned the 3, but not the Rockettes. We did 4 shows a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Wow. I've read a little bit about the world of different tiers of show business in New York City.
Yeah.
And I know that you had everything from the major ballet companies all the way down to Union Square and the Bowery Burlesque and everything. Yeah. And so I am fascinated to know sort of where your niche was, and did you get offered jobs that you really realized were beneath you that you didn't want to do?
Oh yeah. And how?
Really?
Absolutely, yeah. I did played a couple of burlesque houses, and Dodo was with me, and she says, I don't want you to watch what's going on stage. I did 2 shows, and that was enough for the 2 of us. We just were not going to go back.
Well, what was the issue for you and your experience with it?
I was so naive, I didn't really understand. I was street smart in one way and kind of naive on the other way, and I just took what Dodo told me at face value. And I saw the naked women, and I thought, I'm not going out there and doing that. It was an experience I did not want to do again.
Okay.
I did it twice. I thought, that's not for me. And they didn't pay that good.
Yeah.
And when we first started, we lived in a cold water flat, and you know what that is.
I do. It's
1 room with a sink and cold water, and everybody on the floor has 1 toilet with a tub with a shower in it. Mm-hmm. And that was the only toilet for that floor. Then we moved up to a little hotel on 44th Street. It was called the Coolidge Hotel. And it was, and then from there we moved to the Century Hotel, which was really a theater. It was on 46th Street. And it was great because we were right there in Manhattan. It was $19 a week. It was really a theater hotel. Everybody in the hotel was in show business. There were jugglers, there were musicians, there were actors, there were singers, there were dancers, there were stagehands, and it was really, the lobby was like a family group. Everybody kind of collected in there. It was a great time.
So what was your experience then dealing with men, and I mean the bosses, and I also mean the patrons, the people who are actually coming to watch and buying the tickets?
Well, when you're in the theater, you don't see the people. It's just like a nice black void out there.
But you certainly saw the producers and the choreographers.
Yes. Well, as I told you about Billy Rose, he was wonderful to me. I think because I was underage and he was trying really hard to protect me. Because I didn't use the dressing room where the other girls did. And I used the service elevator to get down. So I would change costumes up in my room. He treated me wonderful. I did not have a problem with him at all. Lou Walters he was sort of a figurehead and other people worked for him. And Monty Proser at the Copacabana, he was sort of the same way. He had people that did the job, so he really never... Dick Henry would deal with them for me. I don't remember any problems other than... I remember at the Copacabana, my dressing room was so small I could hardly turn around. And I asked for a bigger dressing room, but I never got one. And at the music hall, our director was female, Florence Rogie.
Oh, really?
And she was wonderful. She was so creative, but she was treated like a second-class citizen by Leonidoff, who was the director. But it's so funny. I can remember going to rehearsals, and they'd be sitting in the theater, and Russell would be here, Leonidoff would be here, and Florence Rogie would be here, and Leonidoff would run over and buzz to Florence about something, and then he'd say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and everything came from her. But he took the credit for it. And she was tiny and very cute. I think she probably was in her 30s. It's hard for me to judge age. Sure. I don't know how old she was. And she herself was a great dancer. Mm-hmm. But what am I? Because that stage is very hard to choreograph for. Because it's a 160-foot proscenium.
Sure.
And you can choreograph for a small space, but to fill that stage and make it entertaining for 6,000 people, that is a craft.
In your experience watching the other dancers come and go, and you're spanning from 14 to 25, did you see instances where you felt like people were taken advantage of, or
all the time,
or mistreated, or
underpaid,
hit on,
underpaid? Yeah. We got $35 a week at the music hall. The orchestra, they were all men. They got paid $100, $125, $150. One of my best friends married one of the men in the orchestra. He was an oboist. He ended up at Boston Symphony. So I know what they got paid, and she did too. And she started dating him. She says, oh my God, they're getting paid triple what we get paid. So the men were paid, and the same with the Glee Club. They were paid much more than we were. And so we were kind of at the bottom of the ladder. And we were getting $35 a week. The Rockettes were getting $50.
Were there instances where women were pressured to date men or be involved? Were they chased by
I was so protected by my grandmother that I never experienced that too much, because if I started to get into trouble, I had the perfect, my grandmother won't let me, and I'd say, thank you, bye.
And now, did she stay with you the entire time
you
were in New York?
All the time I was in New York, she was with me.
Okay, so she didn't stop chaperoning you when you came of age?
No.
I see.
She really protected me. I was very, very lucky, because there were lots of instances, certainly, and that wasn't just the only instance, there were lots of others similar to that creepy, being followed or being sweet-talked or...
Right.
But I always had that wonderful excuse, I've got to talk to my grandmother about it first.
A large sort of overarching question that I'm bound to have to ask.
Yeah.
is about this whole notion. It is absolutely a centerpiece of the world of feminism, that objectification.
The director's couch?
Well, no, it's objectification is a matter of the way women are displayed and therefore treated as objects.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about dance, we're talking about a very physical activity that is largely about observing women.
Yeah.
And it's largely it is more or less sexy depending on the nature of the choreography and the nature of the dance itself. During all those years, those 10 years, I guess I'm just really interested in sort of how you felt about it at the time. That sort of dance and that position as a woman in front of people performing that way. And do you feel differently about it now, looking back on it?
Well, we knew that it was there, but we knew I didn't want any part of it, because I knew, thinking back on it, there was this like undercurrent world in dance. Because I was brought up really in a Catholic faith with high ideals, and you do this, you don't do that. We didn't want to be a part of that world, so we didn't let ourselves. We knew it was there,
right?
But
even in the fundamental choreography of the sort of showbiz dance. Now, you were on point most of the time.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
So even in the more popular sort of nightclub environment, ballet was at the center of it. So it was not as sexy as a lot of dance.
But the chorus girls were.
Sure.
The chorus girls were. I mean, they would have much more revealing costumes, and they were more suggestive. But the Horseshoe, the Copa, the Latin Quarter, it was an elite crowd.
So you never felt then that sort of display of sexuality was distasteful in that environment?
No, there was sexuality, but it wasn't. There's a difference between being raunchy and being sexy.
Okay.
And it was very, yes, we wanted to be very attractive and very glamorous and very appealing, but we didn't want to be in the gutter. And because of my exposure, I wasn't exposed to that because I didn't let myself get into it. And it was there and we knew it.
It may have been that you had an advantage being so young because people felt a responsibility.
I think so too. I think that was a big help. And having my grandmother. Oh my gosh.
Did you ever feel as if you stopped too soon? Did you worry that you had decided to quit dancing too young?
I was brokenhearted. I think when I came home that year, I probably was miserable to live with because I wanted so badly to be back to New York. And I can tell you one thing. The music hall said, if you want to come back within a year, your job will still be there for you. Right. I thought that was wonderful.
That's great.
But in the meantime, I discovered boys and got married.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
that was always a nice feeling to know that I would be welcome back.
Oh, absolutely.
Paul and I moved to Cleveland. When we were out there, I got involved in television. There was a great show on TV called the Joe Potaro Before and After Show. He would take a girl off the street and show her on Monday, and on Wednesday he would show her after he did her hair and her face and everything else. And he was a great beautician. He really was super. So I bleached my hair one day and it came out green. I thought, oh my God, what do I do? So I called him and I said, Joe, help, what can I do? He says, come on in. He says, I know what you did, I'll fix you up. So in the conversation, I said, gee, because of all my theater background, I thought, oh, I'd love to see you do this. You've got beautiful models, but they don't know how to walk, and you don't dress them very well. And I said, I'd love to see you do this, that, and the other thing. And he says, want to be on the show tonight? So I said, sure. So the girl that was on the show, he was on the second floor, and downstairs was a wonderful dress shop. And I thought, why doesn't he take advantage of this great women's dress shop below? So I took the girl downstairs, I dressed her out, and I taught her how to walk, because most of them weren't models. And so they had to walk on and sit down and be interviewed. So it made such a hit that night. So then he hired me on to help him. I was on TV with him for about a year and a half. And I loved doing it. And then I got pregnant with my first daughter. So, and then I did a lot of fashion shows out there too, directing and choreographing fashion shows for Halle Brothers Company. And so I kept my finger in the pie. more or less.
Did you like that shift from being a performer to being the person who was in charge?
Yeah, I did. It was really fun, and I made some extra money.
Did it present a different set of challenges that you had to
completely,
learn your way around?
Completely. It was so because now I could be creative on the other side, which I was.
You were also having to manage some talent and manage people.
Yeah, exactly, and teach them, to choreograph. Suddenly, I had to choreograph for somebody else instead of trying to choreograph for myself, and I found that fun. And then I also found I had to work with their talent because they were only talented so far or could only do so much. And so I had to bring down my expectations and still make them look great. That was a rough one. What happened was my mother got remarried and her second husband died, and she had to run his company, and she asked Paul if he wouldn't come back and help her run the company. So that's how we got back. And so we stayed with her for a while, and then I kept looking for a house. We found this house here in Needham. And so this has been my home ever since.
Right.
And at that point, I only had two girls. I had Pauline and Paula. And I looked around for a school to send them to. And the first year, I sent them back to my old teacher. She was still alive. Brought them into Boston to study with her. They were 3 and 5 years old. And it was getting to be a real problem tracing it. And I didn't have a car, tracing him in and out. And I thought, gee, if I start one class Pauline's age or one class Paula's age, I can teach them myself.
So the impetus to start your dance school really started with wanting to teach your children.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a very selfish reason.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and it wasn't open to school. It was to, hopefully my girls would learn to love dancing like I did. And I thought if I had a legacy to give my children, it's my dance knowledge. And if they ever wanted to follow my footsteps, I knew what a choreographer was looking for. I knew that I could teach them that.
When you go from starting out offering some class so that you can teach your daughters to realizing that this is going to be a business, I mean, what was the span of time?
Well, I would say probably 10 or 12 years.
It took that long?
Oh, it took that long. I had to be a good wife and a good mother, and I limited how much I was teaching because I didn't want to overextend myself. I think when I realized it was the year Paulette Jr. graduated from high school, and I thought, gee, I don't have to do this anymore because I've done my job. And then I thought, well, what about me? I found I loved teaching. And I had all these kids, and I was just going to walk out on them.
What year did you start hiring other teachers? Did you start bringing in other people?
I never hired outside teachers. What happened when I was pregnant with Paulette Jr., I asked some of my older assistants if they could assist me and demonstrate for me, because when I got bigger and couldn't jump anymore. And so that's when I started having assistant teachers. The school kept growing. So then I would ask when they graduated, and they were either in college locally or they got married, I said, well, how about teaching? And that was less time for me. And so I hired my own teachers. So all the teachers all these years have been girls that grew up with me. And that's how it got started.
I guess I'm just fascinated that you went from doing 10 or 12 years of essentially doing small classes that centered around your own kids and other girls who came in, and that at some point you were looking at a business where you had over 100 students and you began employing other teachers.
And the thing was that we were growing, and as the kids were growing up, I found out the income from the studio. I was able to do things that couldn't get on my husband's pay, that I was able to give them other stuff, and I thought, oh, this is pretty good.
So now, as this became a going concern, was your husband involved as a member in this business? Did he do work for the business? He was
psychologically behind me all the time.
But he didn't have a formal role.
No, he never had any, he would help me, lug things, but he never really had anything to do business-wise with it at all.
So as soon as it grew into a concern, the bookkeeping, the payroll, All of those things were things you had to take up yourself.
Yeah, I did them all. And don't forget, I basically had an 8th grade education. Really, I had to learn by doing.
At its largest,
yeah.
I realize that you are currently teaching fewer students now than you were when I first met you at Brandeis.
Definitely.
Was that pretty much as big as the school ever got?
Yeah, it is. Yes,
because definitely. I remember you had almost 300 kids.
Yeah, I did.
And I remember when you would start selling tickets out of the Brandeis box office, people would bring lawn furniture and wait in line
and
for
wait
their
in
tickets.
Line.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it isn't that now. And, well, there's so many, don't forget, I was one of the few schools around then. And there's a lot of schools that are, there were maybe 3 or 4 then. There's probably 20 or 30 now.
Right.
Plus, there's a whole world out there, competition world. And I do not participate in that. And I don't want to, and I'm never going to. Maybe when I'm gone, Alicia and the rest of the kids, they'll get into it. But I don't want to get into that. I don't like the idea of one dancer competing against another. I don't like one school competing. There's such animosity and this dance moms things with the, I couldn't take it. It just would tear my heart out to see people in something that I love so much be so hateful to each other.
Relative to the question I was asking you before about sort of the sexiness of dance and being on display, you've now gone as a teacher and as a business owner training girls. You've gone through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Yeah. You've watched trends
I hate what's out there now
in terms of what's happened. So I'm
disgusted.
I'm interested in your take on the business of training girls to dance and sort of self-image. There have been questions in dance about anorexia for years. And just sort of your philosophy and your feeling about what it is about all this that you think is important to give girls and how you want them to look at themselves and feel about this thing that they're doing when they dance with you.
One of the things I think that makes girls enjoy being with me is I don't stereotype a body. There are girls that are have the perfect ones. There are girls that are overweight, but they're still great dancers, and I want them to feel good about themselves. When a musician sits down to play, it's their instrument. They have the piano or the violin or whatever. With us, our body is our instrument, and you've got to love it, take care of it, admire it, respect it, do all the things that are going to make you feel good about you. And I am appalled at what I see on television now. I've got all these catalogs here. I can go through them and tell you they might as well be burlesque outfits. They are horrible. There's some companies I will not do business with, and they appeal to the lowest level. And I hate to see dance become that. And I see it more and more and more. I'm absolutely disgusted with it. And I think it cheapens the business. I think it cheapens the girls' respect for themselves. I think that's why we have so many problems today. It tears my heart out because I see things that are acceptable with teenagers today that would be sinful years ago. To my mind, they're still bad. And I don't want dance to get at the burlesque level. And I tell my girls, I want you on a pedestal. I don't want you in the gutter. And I see it more and more and more and more. I'm glad I don't have young girls myself growing up today, because you've got to fight that all the time. As bad as it was in my day, it was at a certain level, it was there, and it was like, okay, close the curtain on it. But now it's just out there.
I am interested that a component of this for you, then, this is my view, so you can tell me if I'm wrong, but from being a small child, you said you had one male teacher growing up, being with your grandmother, being in New York, and then growing your dance business. You had only daughters in your own house.
Only daughters.
This has been largely an all-female activity and an all-female business. Yeah. As I said on the phone to you the other day, in any generation, you typically have one or maybe two boys at your studio at a time, rarely more.
Yeah.
In the years I've known you, it's never been more than one or two.
Yeah.
So it's really, really been a business about girls.
Yeah.
Do you feel that has freed you guys focus on a women's prerogative and not have to deal with the whole issue
Absolutely.
of male energy?
Yes, I do feel that strongly.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that I do, that I don't have to deal with young boys and their problems and their sexuality coming into being in with this. I really do feel that I would have a tough time teaching a lot of boys. I'd have to have a male teacher come in to teach them. I was so lucky to have fallen in love with Paul. He wore me like a badge of honor on his sleeve, and he let me be me. A lot of men would never have put up with this crazy lady, you know.
Yeah, you're a force of nature, Paulette. I don't know that a man who was bothered by that wouldn't have lasted very long. I don't think.
You know, he was really very lucky, and it's so hard. He's been gone 18 years now, and that's one of the hardest things I have to live with every day.
In the business of choreographing for girls and managing your teachers who choreograph for girls from an age of 4 up to 18,
Right.
have you had to be careful and balance that whole component of girls being sexy in school and the part B is interacting with parents, especially when they start observing? Has that ever been a problem? Have there been issues?
Oh, yeah,
with
there
parents?
have been issues with my own daughter when she was choreographing. I didn't see what she had done.
You're talking about Junior?
Paulette Jr., yeah. And because she grew up when things started to be more open.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked. And I didn't see it till dress rehearsal. And it was kind of late to it. So when we did the video, I had the videographer cut that section of the video out. I was not going to let that be out in public.
And did you butt heads with her?
Oh, boy. Oh, yes, we did. And how? And I said, don't you ever dare do anything like that again. That's the end of your teaching.
Have you had parents come to you and say, we're uncomfortable with something in a dance that my kids are doing?
Yeah, I have. I'll tell you a funny story, which has nothing to do with sexuality. My grandmother, Dodo, was half Indian, half American Indian.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we did a great Indian number one time with totem poles, and I made great Indian headpieces. And I had a mother call me and say, that was horrible, and how come I did that? And that was such an insult. How can I do that? So I wrote her back a very nice letter. I said, I'm sorry, my grandmother is half Indian. There is no way in the world I would disrespect my grandmother. And I'm part Indian. I was just shocked to think that somebody would even attempt to do that. But why not? I think it's fabulous. Why not? It honors the Indians. That was with pride with them. And I see nothing wrong. I think it's delightful because of me.
As you wander off into the distant sunset, do you feel that this business of teaching girls to dance, in what ways, where do you see it going? I noticed that one of your dancers now has been dancing with the Patriots cheerleaders, and you see girls kind of, as adults, some of them still dancing.
Oh, yeah.
What do you imagine for your little school and your business when you're gone? Where do you think it's going to be?
I think my faculty, they want to keep it going. We've had discussions about it, and it's their legacy. I leave it to them. And I think they would like to continue my philosophy. Mm-hmm. There aren't many of us left who aim at the higher level. And I'd like to see the things that Harriet taught me, I'd like to be able to pass on. And I took from some wonderful, like Ted Shawn, who was the father of American dance. I studied with him every summer. And I learned so much from him. I studied with Margaret Krask, Anthony Tudor with the Royal Ballet. Those kind of things, I was very lucky to have danced with the movers and shakers of dance when it first started. So that's still in my soul and in my mind and in my heart. And I've tried to pass on what I know to them. And if they can keep that going, because there are a few of us left. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see that be able to continue on. I don't want it to die when I die.
The last question I wanted to ask really is, I'm fascinated personally that you're born in the late 20s. You began dancing professionally right at the dawn of the Second World War. How do you think it is that you were given the opportunity in a world that didn't afford professional opportunities to women much? Do you just think it was an anomaly, or did you come from a family where the women were just powerful and self-sufficient and knew what they were doing? What do you attribute it to, this freedom that you felt to pursue whatever you wanted to and to take on the world?
My mother and my grandmother encouraged me. My grandmother, when she was a young girl and she had her 2 children, she kicked her husband out of the house because she said he cheated on her. And in order to earn her own living, she opened up a millinery shop. Now, women didn't own businesses when she was a little girl.
Well, they didn't own them much when you were a little girl.
Yeah, right. And she opened up her own store and sold hats. In those days, ladies did not leave the house without a chapeau and gloves.
Well, and there were many things that they didn't do without a husband, or without somebody escorting them.
Yeah, and so because of that, and she was so creative, what she couldn't do with her hands. She taught me how to sew. When I was a little girl, we lived in a basement apartment, and half of it above grade, and there was on Commonwealth Ave, and there was a little sign in the window, Madame La Charité Alterations. And she took in sewing, and she would teach me how to sew when she was sewing for other people. So I learned her gift of sewing. So she had her own business. When my mother got married, she moved to New York, and she created hats for Mr. John. Now, Mr. John was the hat maker at those times, and she designed for him. And then when I was born, Mother asked her if she wouldn't come home and take care of me, and she'd support her and me too.
And now, you said your mother took over a business when your father died?
Yeah.
What business was that?
He was in the oil business, and it was very hard being a woman in the oil business. That's why she asked Paul if he wouldn't come home, because she needed that male image.
So you grew up with the example of really assertive, strong women who were doing whatever.
Yeah. And nobody ever said to me, you can't do it. I knew from the time I could think I wanted to dance. I was going to dance come hell or high water. And nothing was going to stop me.
And I think it's a tribute to them that nobody ever told you that you needed to limit yourself, or that you couldn't pursue what you wanted to, as long as you were responsible for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, and I try to teach that to my dancers.
Right.
I tell them, that nobody said hard work couldn't be fun. Hard work is hard work, yes, but you can enjoy working hard. Nobody said you can't enjoy it.
Paulette, the thing, I know that you emphasize the joy, the internal joy of the experience that they have dancing for themselves. I will tell you, maybe this is a male view, that the thing that keeps hitting me is how essentially meaningful the ensemble is, the responsibility you have to the person on your right and the person on your left, and it's all timed, it's all in tempo, so achieving that flow and that ensemble as a member of a team, of a group,
it's all teamwork,
is really, really critical. And to me, that is I just think that's just a giant gift. I know they form real deep love relationships as friends.
Oh, yes.
Over a lot of years, because a lot of your girls danced together for a long time.
A long time, yeah.
But I think that sense of ensemble is just huge.
Yeah, and they're friends. I have girls that come back to me and they say, "Oh, do you remember so-and-so? We're still friends. We still write to each other, or now they text to each other." Yeah. And but it's amazing. They've kept their friendships, just like I have with Janet, who just called.
And you've got this core of young women who all work with you and work for you now, who the vast majority of them learned their dance from you.
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a tribute.
Well, I feel I'm not rich in money, but I feel like a wealthy woman. I really feel that I am very rich in the girls that surround me. I love them to pieces, and I feel their love back. And we share something that only another dancer can understand. because in this world of dance, we kind of have to be a little bit crazy to to be a dancer, and other people don't quite understand us. Like the girls that will play sports, and they'll say, what are you going there for? And they don't understand how we feel and how much fun we have working hard.